Welcome back to this week's episode of the Deeper Podcast. I am Doug Congdon. Jeremy Wynn is still out, but this week, for my co-hosts, I have two beautiful men here, Liam Weingartner.
Emphasis on the beautiful.
And Brian Tryhoose.
Probably not so much of an emphasis on the beautiful.
Come on, Brian, be more arrogant.
Again, regular hosts don't need any introduction. We are recording this on Halloween. It is Halloween today. I know you both celebrate because you're pagans. I wanted to ask you a couple quick questions of the day about Halloween. So,
QQ.
actually, first and foremost, I was informed that you did talk about Halloween on the men's taping of the men's podcast yesterday. So, real quick recap for our listeners: best and worst, or high tier, low tier candy options. What do we got?
Well, I didn't really have a great answer for the best because there's like a lot in that category, like Twix, Kit Kat, Reese's, peanut butter cups. But for worst, it's Almond Joy, period.
Yeah. Okay. Wow, that's strong take. Yeah. Not Mounds or not even like Tootsie Rolls.
I kind of put Mounds in the same same thing as Almond Joy because there was always those left.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Those are the two things that are sitting at the bottom of the bowl. Yeah. Liam, what did you say?
So top tier, Nerd Gummy Clusters.
Who gives those out? Okay, that's awesome.
Nobody, but I bought a bunch of them for the daddy-daughter dance, and they're super good. Yeah. Bottom tier, Whoppers.
Oh, yeah.
By far the worst candy.
Where would you put Tootsie? Tootsie Rolls are the throwaway candy of Halloween for me.
They're okay.
Okay.
But they're not, I'm going to go buy some Tootsie Rolls.
Almond Joy and Mounds are like those channels when you have a cable subscription that you don't actually want, but you have to have because they come in with the package.
They come with everything else.
Yeah, because no one just goes and buys Almond Joys.
Yeah.
I'm sure someone does, and they'll come tell me that, but I don't.
The coconut.
Speaking of which, segue out and then back, but we did talk last week, about burgers, best burgers in Topeka, and said if you had any opinion, let us know. We did get some write-ins. Okay,
I have to know what this does.
Well, specifically for the Shack. Okay, the Shack got two mentions.
What was the top, like, for you guys?
Oh, well, since Burger Stand was leaving, Five Guys was kind of the one.
Thursday Club doesn't get a shout out for best burger in Topeka,
Thursday Club did get a shout out, but you sound like an elitist person right now because most people don't maybe know what Thursday Club is. And I guess we're going to plug it 2 weeks in a row. Liam, go ahead.
It's so good. So Circle Coffee on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday becomes Thursday Club, where they have smash burgers.
Yeah.
And don't sleep on their fried plantains either. They are
I will sleep
amazing.
all day on fried plantains.
He's like the most elitist person I know.
Right, I know. He's such a snob.
This is true.
Hipster snob.
I am. If there's something I like,
this
I love
is the first mention of plantains on a Fellowship podcast too.
This wasn't even the point. The point was to say this. Thank you for reaching out to us. We've actually set up an email where especially you can ask us questions or ask us anything, but also if you have feedback about our quick questions of the day. The email address is just simply deeper@fbctopeka.com. So deeper@fbctopeka.com if you want to interact with this. If you like Tootsie Rolls, please send an email defending that
Put some
horrific statement. Okay. So let me just then back to the Halloween questions we haven't talked about. Quick answers. Did you trade candy at the end of Halloween with siblings when you came back?
100% no.
Weirdo.
No.
Okay, Brian?
I didn't have any siblings.
Okay, that's
sad.
That's on me for forgetting that. That's
sad
so
Halloween.
Okay, we did that every time. That was great. And also a way to offload the almonds and Mounds to the random kid that liked it. And then best Halloween costume that you ever wore, when you were most proud of.
My last time I ever went, I went as Crisscross, which I don't know if I'm the most proud of that, but I did it. Okay. The one I'm most proud of is I went as Chris Sabo, who... If you can email the Deeper Podcast and know who Chris Sabo is, that will do me well.
I'm guessing it's a wrestler.
Third baseman, Cincinnati Reds,
I was thinking
1990
WWE.
National or World Series champion. He wore those rec specs.
So you had some.
So I had rec specs and a Reds hat, baseball bat.
That's so great. Liam?
Number 17. Chris Sabo.
There used to be this like used costume store downtown.
Wow. In Topeka?
Yeah.
Oh.
And I remember going there and getting this costume that looked like a flying squirrel and just said SB on the chest. So I think it was Squirrel Boy.
Oh, okay.
That's what I decided that it was. It was hilarious. I loved that costume.
What year was that?
Man. Early 2000s, probably. Why?
We just did a skit at the church one year for Super Kids Super Camp with Squirrel Boy.
Did you?
Yes, and I'm just wondering. I don't
Oh my
remember.
goodness,
Was
please
this
let
my
that be
debut
true.
acting that I didn't even
Please
remember?
Let this be true that church donated that
Probably
costume
did.
afterwards, and then you
What were the
bought it.
colors?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I mean,
not gonna
I
tell
thought
you
like
that.
Superman type colors.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was
Okay.
blue and red and yellow.
Okay, last quick question: how much, as a parent, Liam is new parent, how much candy do you allow your children to eat on Halloween as they're getting it? Brian, you obviously have the most experience. Liam, this is a relatively hypothetical question for you yet.
Going to our first trunk or treat tonight.
Trunk or treat? Okay, cool.
Yeah,
I mean, it kind of goes unchecked on,
I like that.
on
Honestly,
night one. You know,
Okay.
after that, it's like you can have a couple
Okay.
with dinner. But like during
Yeah.
Halloween night, like today, Jake was telling me that the teachers don't do much on Halloween Day because they have the parties and everything. And I was like, I think they should do everything on Halloween Day because the next day is going to be absolutely worthless because
Sugar
you stay
crash.
up late, sugar crash. I feel sorry for those teachers tomorrow.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
yeah, I don't think I'm gonna probably limit it, but that's me
Okay.
saying that without talking to Allie at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Who will have strong opinions, I'm sure.
And they
Yeah.
were a household that was like, you can have 2 cookies
Yeah.
and then you're done. Just like any time,
They
not
should
Halloween
regulate
related.
that in-
That was
Oh,
just
wow.
regulated desserts.
They should regulate that in the lobby here.
Yeah, okay. That'll go
That's
well.
not going over well.
And I was like, I'll eat a whole sleeve of Oreos. And so, yeah, she has a much better relationship
Oh, wow.
with
So
food.
we're on the strictest side of this. So you're saying that 2 cookies for dessert and that's it
Yeah.
was like a limit.
That was their limit.
If our kids are never getting 2 cookies for dessert. So, and on
So, like,
Halloween,
2
I think it's
Oreos?
like, okay, Oreos are maybe different. I was thinking like a real
No,
chocolate
that's what I'm
cookie.
talking
Okay,
about. Like,
okay.
yeah, that's kind of their deal.
Yeah, we make Halloween candy last the year. So we still have Halloween candy from last year that they haven't gotten rid of because it's like, just a couple on Halloween and then one that's their dessert maybe if they want that going forward. So it lasts a long time in the Congdon household. Thanks to Lee.
Honestly,
That's crazy.
they like do huge in like the first 2 or 3 days, and then they just like stop themselves.
That's great. You get them tired of it. Yeah. Okay. Teaching them an
Man,
important
I
lesson.
wish I had that kind of just relationship with candy. It would just be a pile of wrappers by me. Just imagine a young Liam just playing video games and just destroying his bag of Halloween candy over the next couple of weeks until
picture
it's
that.
gone.
I can picture that.
I don't remember though Halloween candy as a kid.
Really?
Like, I don't remember what that was like so long ago.
Okay, wow. That's
So
weird.
sad.
That's a depressing
Yeah.
segue there. Thank you for that. Hopefully you have a better Halloween this year than growing up, Brian.
No siblings.
More fun watching your kids do it anyway. That's what I've always
I
said.
know it is.
Okay, we are week 4 of our series called Way Back to God, Minor Prophets. Brian is teaching this week. So Brian is going to give us the brief overview of our book this week, which is Obadiah. So go for it, Brian. Tell us what it's like.
Yeah, brief overview for a brief book.
Yeah.
21 verses, 1 chapter. Some people learned that today. But there's,
I learned that today.
there's 1 chapter.
I promise I've read it once or twice.
We do not know who Obadiah is. We're not quite sure when it was written. We're not even quite sure who the intended audience was, but we know what it describes. And it describes God's judgment on the country of Edom and how they are going to be eliminated and no more in the future, because for them it had not happened yet. So
Oh, that was a brief overview.
That was brief.
Yeah. Okay, so part of what we talked about, or I wanted, maybe this is putting you on the spot too much, is an overview. Since this book is about Edom, right? And that's the descendants of Esau. Again, if you're listening to this, hopefully you've heard the message, so you know all this. But why did they hate each other?
I mean, this starts with Genesis chapter 25, I think it is, when they are born. Jacob and Esau are twins. Esau comes out first. Jacob is grabbing at his ankle, and there's a prophecy that says that the older will serve the younger. Then Jacob kind of takes his brother's birthright. Esau sells it for, I think, a stew, and then he deceives him out of his blessing from his father, and Esau says, I'm going to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
And Jacob leaves for a while, and then they kind of have a reunion.
Yeah,
like they kind of
weird
get
reunion.
together, but then they go their separate places. It's
Yeah.
like, we're going to agree to like be next to each other,
Yeah.
but like far away from each other.
Yeah.
And then over the course of the rest of history, like they're just not good to each other both
Yep.
ways.
Yeah.
Edom doesn't let the Israelites pass through their land on the way to the promised land. Israel will go and take out 10,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt. And they're kind of always at war. It's like a brotherly rivalry
Yeah.
that goes through the years.
Like a deadly, like,
Very deadly.
Yeah, brotherly
Yeah.
rivalry gone wrong.
Yeah.
Sibling rivalry to the worst.
Kind of like
that's
KU
with
in
swords.
Missouri.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
with
because there's
swords.
actual
Yeah.
blood. Oh, instead of gun. I guess there was like bloodshed between
Yeah.
KU and Missouri back in the day. But yeah, that's a good comparison, probably.
Yeah.
So they hate each other. We are, let's see, if the Exodus was 14. So we're roughly at least 1,000 years away from the original kind of rivalry. But these nations have like been steeped in hate for each other, like for that long, basically. Stewing, if you will,
Stewing.
in their hatred of each other. That was live. I made that up on the spot. Get on board,
He
Liam.
wrote that down. It's on his paper. He wrote
Such a
it
liar.
down.
Okay, so we kind of see Edom rejoicing when Judah gets destroyed, right? Either whether that's going to happen or whether it just happened, and God is very upset with that. So some of the correlations to what we're going to talk about kind of have to do with the idea of who's our enemy, right? Who do we think of as our enemies? And so when we were talking about this at Run Through, we kind of thought one of the good ways to define enemy was, who do you rejoice when something bad happens to them or when they fail?
Or
yeah,
who
fill that out.
rejoices when something bad happens to you?
Sure, right.
Yeah,
There you
even
go.
on the flip side too.
Yeah. So that's the first question. When you guys think about that, who's your enemy? Who do you think of as your enemy? What kind of comes to your mind? And you should probably give your qualifier there.
My qualifier.
Yeah, I remember you were saying like the more we define it, the more we're tempted to, leave people out on the outside. Or whatever.
Yeah, well, one of the things that happened in the run through is like some people went very personal, and like there's someone who has harmed them or has caused them pain, and they looked at that person as an enemy. And for some people, it's kind of ideological. And if we said, who's the person in your life, then if I don't have a person, like I'm good. This doesn't apply to me. When I think we all probably have someone who would fit in that category.
Okay, that's very helpful. Liam, who did you think of, either in his car analogy or afterwards?
Yeah, I struggled, partly because I'm like really good at forgiving people, and no, I think that there's like a certain,
Elitist.
there's a certain level of, I maybe it's just being oblivious sometimes that I don't know if I'm, if somebody doesn't like me. Though I think I like have a good sense of that. There isn't anybody that came to mind that's like, I don't really like this person specifically. So I think it was more broad for me. And it really kind of, as I was sitting and stewing on it, was more so people who, specifically, people who are resistant to change, even if they're proved wrong. Like I just have a hard time loving and wanting to be around really stubborn people who are set in their ways. So that was something that, as I was kind of thinking through it post run through, I was like, yeah, those are people that I don't want to spend time around, don't want to talk to. I'm easy to discount. That was
Are
kind
you
of,
able to kind of, again, go further down into the handles of like when you think about people who are unwilling to change, what are they unwilling to change? Are we talking about their ideas or beliefs or their attitudes,
beliefs?
actions?
Yeah, it's kind of, I feel like it's kind of all encompassing, but it has more to do with, I think, their ideas and beliefs more than anything else. Like if you, I am somebody who just bucks tradition. I just am not a traditional person in a lot of ways. And so anytime somebody says, oh, you have to do this just because it's the way it's always been done, I'm immediately going to revolt against that. So it's like that kind of thought process of why does it have to continue the way that it is? I'm resistant towards. So people who are like really set in that way, like, yeah, we're going to struggle.
Okay. I'm curious, and when we get to the rejoicing when they fail kind of idea of that, do you like rejoice when they're forced to change, basically, or when something comes and smacks them upside the head to prove that they were wrong?
Yeah, like if I'm right. Yeah,
right.
yeah,
I can see
for
it.
sure.
Okay. What were you going to say, Brian?
I was going to make a joke that Liam is not the one who has a lot of enemies. He's probably the one who other people do.
I
He's the
am
enemy. He's the villain.
an enemy to a lot of people. That would shock me. I'll be honest. That would surprise. Oh yeah, it would surprise me a little bit.
Okay. Brian, what about you?
Yeah, I think someone shared this when we were talking earlier about it's hard to do one of these podcasts sometimes because like you could give names or you can give stories and people try to figure things out. But I would say when people have caused me pain or told me what I couldn't do or what I didn't have the giftings to do, or people who have caused people in my family pain, those people I tend to, hold a grudge against. Yep. And when things don't work out, I could very much be tempted to be like, they're getting what's coming to them.
Yep. That's my biggest thing too is, I think about people who would view me as the enemy, and I have people I can think of. So you don't, like, Liam, great for you.
Somebody thinks that you're their enemy.
I know that has been true in the past. Okay. I don't know that that's a current reality, but my first thought was high school.
Same there. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I feel you on that.
My first thought was high school, and I knew this guy hated my guts. Like, I think it centered around a girl. I'm not sure, but pretty sure he hated my guts. We, as small school, we played on sports teams together. We took school trips together. So we just had to be in the same environment. But the way that he looked at me and the way that he talked about me, and then one time when he threatened physical violence against me, I just knew, okay, this guy wishes harm upon me. Like he would love for me to fail. And that made me super uncomfortable to be around a person who is always like hoping that you fail. What a debilitating, life to lead if that's somebody that's around you a lot. And then I just realized I had the same. So when I had wounding, we'll say in one of my first jobs, and was kind of passed over for something that I thought I deserved, it took me years of like coming before the Lord and asking him to help my heart to not see the people who made that decision in secret as evil, as people who I wanted harm to come to. And then, man, and again, in ministry, it's just, when you talk about this stuff, it sounds even grosser, right? So I was like, man, I hope he fails in ministry. Like, I hope the youth group falls apart. And then you sit there in that thought for like 10 seconds and you're like,
that's dark.
Okay. Yikes. You got some stuff you need to work on in your heart. But like, like Brian said, people who have wounded me, my family, said things about my kids, have, done things to harm our future. Those are the people that I'm like, love to see it if they just rotted away, So I can, that evilness is inside me, just like it would be, I'm guessing, if I was in Edom or in Judah and looking at those people who have like for years caused trauma to, my safety.
Yeah, and I feel like that's the hard part too, is when you kind of look at the story. It's like Israel is being punished for wickedness and for evil, and so it's not always the case that the person that we're rooting against is pure,
clean,
righteous in any way. And so but I think that makes it easier for us to justify when we are wishing harm on our enemies, when we're like, well, they're bad.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't I wish for bad things to happen to bad people?
Yeah.
It just makes it easier to do.
Yeah. But okay. So how do you, I just was thinking about this. I try to do this every podcast where I go totally off script just to mess with you. So how do you mix that with David? How do you mix what we're talking about now with David's, imprecatory psalms or imprecatory prayers where he's like, God, get them, please let their foot fall into the pit that they have made for me. I hope they get trapped and ensnared. What do you do with that in light of what God says in Obadiah?
I had someone, dear friend, come and ask me about that in the last couple of years. They said, what do we do with these? And, as I read through the Bible and mark it up, for others, I try to write this little note that says, these are scriptural. These are in here. This is God's word for us. I would be very careful about praying these prayers, and kind of with the lens of, do I want something like this to happen to me? And before I cast someone down and talk about their unrighteousness, I need to make sure I'm in a place of, I'm right before the Lord and I'm doing this in a righteous and just way. And to be honest, I have never been in a place where I have felt like I could pray those prayers about another person. And so I see them there. I believe that they're God's ordained word, but I would I would not be quick to claim those in my life.
Okay. Yeah. Anything you'd add to that, Liam?
I mean, I don't think it's wrong to pray for the justice of God. So if you take it and kind of like zoom out away from the specifics of, praying for them to be trodden underfoot or things like that, you know what I mean? Smashed and
women and children dashed on the
Yeah,
rocks.
exactly.
All the things.
But I think praying for God's justice to be done, and I think in some ways the wrath of God being displayed is glorifying to the holiness of God. But that can also look like the wrath of God being poured out on Jesus for their behalf too. Like somebody's going to have to take wrath. So is it going to be that person who is done wrong, or is it going to be Jesus? And the hard part, I think, is praying that Jesus pays for that person and that they're saved, because we don't want them to be saved.
Yeah.
We want them to pay.
Yeah. That's where the evil comes in.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's a very clear difference to me between praying for the justice of God, which I think is something we should do, and getting really graphic and wanting bad things to happen to certain people, which is what it's very much in there. And so I would think more than once about that before I did that. But praying for the justice of God, from your message last week, like that's what we need to be doing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost praying for the justice of God, separate from your own defensiveness or your own focus on, I want the justice of God so that I feel better about this or whatever, basically. Yeah. But man, when God's name is dragged through the mud, or when somebody is bringing injustice upon vulnerable, you should pray for justice to be done. That makes sense. Okay. I like that. That was helpful.
God says, vengeance is mine.
Yeah.
I will repay. Yeah. Not you repay.
Yeah.
I will repay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So again, it's the application for us in reading these 21, right? 21 verses of Obadiah is basically going to be, don't be Edom. How do you love your enemy? Love your neighbor. And so this is a common-ish application for us for the New Testament. Give me some examples of what it might look like. And you could use election season time, obviously, what's going on right now, but give me some examples. It's crazy to think that some people will listen to this and the election will be done. Like by the time they listen to this, that's weird. It's just weird that it's that close. But how have you lived it out either well or not so well? How have you loved your enemy, like really practically? Give us some handholds to go forward on.
I would say with what I shared earlier about people who I feel like have wronged me, it does start with prayer.
Yeah.
And some of those prayers are like me literally just writing them out in the journal. I don't even know how to say them, but getting the words out. And then generally over time, I can pray heartfelt prayers for people who have wronged me, where I want God's best for them. And I want God to provide and do all the things that I would pray for my family. It takes time to get there, and that's not easy. From an ideological perspective, I think seeing people as people and not ideas. And people are going to have different ideas than you. They're going to disagree with you. They're going to not think like you or act like you or do the things you want them to do. But being able to understand that this is still someone made in the image of God. They're worthy of dignity and value. And even if they don't represent the things I want to, they deserve to be treated the same way that I want to be treated. And I know that comes down to like the golden rule, and that sounds all cutesy, but I really should treat everyone else the way that I want to be treated.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Especially again, I'm sure most people are hearing that like I am through the grid of election season, right? Through the political parties and who wins and all that stuff. That's helpful.
Yeah. I think a big part of it for me, it started with a recognition of like how much I needed the love of God personally to receive the love of God. And I shared this in our men's study, that it really took me sitting with Ephesians 3 and meditating on like the height and the width and the depth and the breadth of the love of God, all that I had been forgiven for, all of the, like I was God's enemy. And his response to me was to pursue me in love and to make a way for us to be reconciled. And the more that I can sit with that, the less pride I can come to like a situation where I feel like I've been wronged or I've poured out and not received anything in return. Because I think it's pride that ultimately keeps us from, and that's what Brian talks about in the message, is like pride is a huge barrier for us to love those who have wronged us. So that's where I had to really start. And that it took a long time, I think, in that space when I've been wronged or feel like I've been unloved or mistreated or betrayed, before I can then move to the space that you're talking about of like praying God's best for them. So I kind of had to like go back, recognize what happened to me first, what God did for me first, and then I could move forward in that space.
Okay. So give me an example, because tying what you said earlier about stubborn people or people who are, you're right, you think, and they're wrong, which generally leads to pride right away, right? Or comes from a place of pride.
One of my more common sins. Yeah.
That's weird. Allie talks about that all the time. So how do you, once you have recognized, okay, this is what God did for me, now I can pray for them. How does the actual like living it out when you're actually overlapping your life with them, right? Or having conversations, how does it spill out when you're in the right place?
Very practically, it's not checking out when they talk.
That's great. See, that's the kind of practical stuff.
I mean that. It's like when these people, I won't go into any specifics, but when they open their mouths, I'm not checking out because I'm not automatically discounting everything that they say because I don't value them. Like that's the lack of love that's in me. Yeah. But it's choosing to recognize that this is a real person, not just their ideas, like you were saying. And I want to love them. And honestly, the more that I've actually listened to people, even the people that I would like never feel like I would have anything in common with, man, my love for them just grows. Even if I hear hard things, even if they share things but as I understand and I'm able to hear more of their story that fleshes them out and makes them a person to me that's made in the image of God.
Yeah, I feel like a crucial piece of that, because this is true of me too, is understanding them. And like, so you have to listen to them enough to understand why they think the way they do, even if it is 100% different.
Still might disagree with you in the end.
Probably am.
Yeah.
Still going to disagree with you. But knowing their story, knowing why they believe what they believe or think what they think, again, lends weight to the idea that, this is a human being made in God's image. Like I can see their thought processes. I can see how they came to this through trauma or whatever. And maybe, just maybe, it actually ends with, and I can see that they're right. And I was wrong the whole time. Like there is that possibility, not for Liam, but for those of us humble enough to be open to the truth.
and realizing that we're probably no different than them.
Yeah. Right.
A couple of pieces of art that have helped me. One is a song, and it's
Caedmon's Call. You too.
Well, Derek Webb. Of
There
course,
you go.
of
Got
course.
there. Yeah.
But it's nothing unifies like a common enemy, and we've got one sure as. Can't say that word. He may be living with your kids. He may be sleeping with your wife. He may not look like you think. And he's talking about himself. Like he is his own worst enemy. And then the other one, and I've used this illustration from G.K. Chesterton a ton, where, they put out the essay of what's wrong with the world.
Yeah.
And he says, "Dear sirs, I am sincerely yours, G.K. Chesterton."
Yeah.
And it's this realization that the problem with the world is not out there. The problem with the world is not Democrats or Republicans. The problem with the world is not people on one side or the issue or the other. The problem is that I exist and that I bring my sin stuff and I am contaminating and contributing to all that is wrong with the world. And if I can see that I'm bringing that to the table, who am I to look at someone else and say, no, you're worse than me?
Yeah.
And I think that realization that you were talking about ourselves, I just think that would go so far if we could, what is the thing about the other side of the camera, take the log out of your eye and
so you can see the speck in the others.
Just see it. So I think it would be really helpful for us.
Thinking,
are you going to answer?
I don't have to answer. I'm the host. So I do what
fair.
I want.
Yeah, no, you have power. Hey.
So Brian used the story of the Good Samaritan. I'm guessing you'll probably still use that in your sermon. That is a very, in a sense, reactive story, responsive story to something that is put in front of us, somebody in need, and the car crash story too, right? Boom. So love is often seen in the Bible, though, as proactive, right? As action towards people. So what when we're talking about Wednesday, well, maybe even come, like 2 weeks from now, and whenever the election is finally done with and somebody has declared the winner. Have you thought about what it looks like ever to like proactively love people who voted differently from you? I mean, this is a very specific election-specific one, and we can cut this if there's nothing there. But I think when I think of loving my enemy and neighbor, I think the end result of checking my heart, remembering the gospel, praying for them, the end result is like moving towards them in love, proactively doing something. Now, that looks like messaging communication when it comes to my past. When I'm thinking about the enemies in my past and having to deal with that, it looks like reaching out to them and saying, hey, I just want you to know, like, I want to apologize for the way I treated you, for the way I thought about you. Is there any good proactive ideas for if people are struggling with election stuff and no matter who wins, like what to do to proactively love somebody on the other side of the aisle?
When the 2016 election happened, Tuesday night, the next Wednesday, we had just gotten a new student pastor, and I was still doing the message at that time. And so I'm doing the message that Wednesday after Trump and Clinton. And I would say, like, split down the middle of the room, there were half the students who were just really, really excited. And we had some students that were literally in tears and really, really sad and upset. And, I just chose to address it. And I said, look, for those of you who are upset, God is in control of all of these things. When the nations come against him in Psalms 2, he laughs. Mm-hmm. He's not threatened. Like, you do not need to live in fear about what's going on. Your God is in control. And to the ones who were like celebratory, I said, like, you need to understand that you have brothers and sisters across the room who are devastated. And so having pride and rubbing it in their face, that's not kindness. And so you can be happy that your person won the election, but how are you going to do that while still having unity with your brothers and sisters in Christ? And so I just think we have to understand what we're actually living in. We are in God's kingdom, and we are representing him above all else. Mm-hmm. And so if we have sad brothers and sisters, we mourn with those who mourn. And if we have people who are happy, we allow them to rejoice, but we do that with humility and not with pride. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it almost identical. 2016, I was in college, and I remember that night of the election, going to bed, having an extremely vivid dream of a friend of mine who was just like in the dream, just going through it, just fear, anxiety, everything. So I woke up the next morning, I reached out to him after finding out the results of the election, and he was in that space of feeling anxiety and fear about the future of our country and all of these things, and because of the result of the election. And so it was just a reminder. It's like, hey, I'm, and I might catch some flack for this, but I'm probably the least politically engaged person that I know. So I didn't have nearly the amount of care that he did, but it was still like, I felt like I needed to care for him, even if I felt like his feelings about the results of the election were misplaced. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's like our citizenship is in heaven. Like that's who we are. So whether I rejoice in a victory or mourn in a defeat, I think we have to find that kind of middle ground of saying, it's like, no, I shouldn't be so strongly moved. I should be content no matter the outcome because Jesus is in control of all of those things. But it does move us to comfort and reminder at times.
Yeah.
I know he's kind of talking about money when Paul says, I've learned the secret of not having enough and the secret of having plenty. But the secret for him is that, he can do all things through Christ who gives him strength. And regardless of what happens on Wednesday, we can still live for a king and a kingdom through Christ who gives us strength.
Yeah.
So
that's great. And obviously the theme of God being sovereign over the nations, raising them up and flattening them is throughout the minor prophets. So I'm guessing it's not the last time we see this, but I loved your answer. Somebody who asked that question hoping that there was a good answer. That was a great answer. So I appreciate having something to do proactively thinking about next week, because people are going to be hurt one way or the other. So yeah, good to remember God is sovereign. He's on his throne. Any other major thoughts that we didn't cover that you guys want to mention about Obadiah?
None that come to mind.
No? Okay. Great. Brian, or actually, since you gave us the overview, Liam, will you pray for our church as we kind of worship this weekend and as we, think through the big stuff happening in our country?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Father, we thank you for the reminder that you are in control. And not only that you're in control, but you have given us clear direction on how to live in this world that you have made. So I pray that you would align our hearts to the truth in your word, that you would remind us of who our neighbor is. And ultimately, God, even our enemies are those that have been put in front of us to be loved by us, to be shown the picture of Jesus. And we need your help to do that. Remind us by humbling us in our own sin and reminding us all that we've been forgiven from. Show us an even greater picture of your love and your sacrifice, your grace, and your pursuing and proactive mercy that sets the example for how we can model that in the world. May the world see by the way that we treat one another who you are, God, and especially as we look to this election season and the conclusion of the election season. We need your grace, we need your mercy, we need your comfort, and we need reminders of who we really are to center and ground us in our identity that is found only and finally in your word. And help us to be ready, God, for whatever outcome, to continue to walk with you faithfully. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you, Liam. Thank you, church family, for tuning in to this week's episode of the Deeper Podcast. We'll see you next time.